And I think it's also about trying to cut off the head of the snake here. In other words, the regime is the snake, and we're trying to get the leaders out of there so some kind of transition can take place. A military strike in of itself won't do that unless you put boots on the ground here, and no one's thinking about doing that. But it certainly helps to put them on the path to doing that. And listen, just the threat of this happening has to be weakening the resolve of the leaders around the Ayatollah. I mean, Iran, Cheryl, is at the worst situation it's ever been since they came into power in 1980.
Is the Iranian regime about to fall? Check out the latest update from General Jack Keane on Fox News. We'll watch it together and then we'll talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
As President Trump maintains Iran wants to make a deal. Now, the commander-in-chief telling Axios in a brand new interview, quote, "We've got a big armada next to Iran, bigger than Venezuela. They want to make a deal. I know so. They called on numerous occasions. They want to talk." Now, the president reportedly coming close to ordering a strike on Iranian targets earlier this month over the killing of tens of thousands of protesters that have been out pushing back against the regime. Some advisors reportedly, though, cautioned him at any attempt at a regime change, saying that can be a risky proposition. I want to bring in Fox News senior strategic analyst and Institute for the Study of War chairman, General Jack Keane. General, the situation with Iran seems to be coming to a head. How do you assess things right now?
Yeah, well, certainly I agree with that assessment. We've been waiting some days now to get these additional assets into the region, mostly maritime assets to carry a strike group and the assorted ships that come with it. They have air defense systems, certainly, that can help with any retaliation attack by Iran to protect our bases and also to protect Israel. And then they also have, obviously, aircraft, but we moved a lot of aircraft into the region to various air bases, as well as air defense assets. But they also have offensive cruise missiles that can be used as well. I think what this is really about is, one, is holding the regime accountable, as you indicated, for the thousands that have been killed, and also the tens of thousands that have been in prison. And the president said he would do just that. And I think it's also about trying to cut off the head of the snake here. In other words, the regime is the snake, and we're trying to get the leaders out of there so some kind of transition can take place. A military strike in of itself won't do that unless you put boots on the ground here, and no one's thinking about doing that. But it certainly helps to put them on the path to doing that. And listen, just the threat of this happening has to be weakening the resolve of the leaders around the Ayatollah. I mean, Iran, Cheryl, is at the worst situation it's ever been since they came into power in 1980. And they are weak politically, economically, and militarily, and really on the cusp of not being even able to recover any of this because of the economic situation in such poor shape militarily. You can imagine the pressure that the leaders feel, much as the leaders around Maduro were feeling. Is this worth sticking with this leader? Mm-hmm. If our fate is what it appears to be, you know, that our fate is a very dangerous situation in terms of the other leaders surviving.
Well,
so there's a lot of pressure on the regime.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming we're talking to some of those leaders, like we were speaking to the leaders in Venezuela prior to the operation that we conducted there.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir, but there was a defection in Davos by an Iranian official, and then what we're seeing now is that there seems to be some reporting out there that, to your point, I agree with you that, look, the Ayatollah is back in a bunker again. And the way to do this is to target the Iranian, the RGC, but then also to find those allies, if you will, those underneath the Ayatollah that are willing to work with the United States. And I agree with you about no boots on the ground. That seems to be, the concern from this side of the Atlantic. Do you think that that's possible?
Well, we don't know, but I just know that the pressure is significant, and certainly the threat of an attack, and people know when President Trump says he's going to do something, he does it. Mm-hmm. So I think, the attack itself, executed, could put them on a pathway to a change. and two, if it's something else can occur as a result of the pressure that's on them, that certainly would be a welcome event anyway. We're trying to get rid of the head of the snake here and eventually try to work with a new government that would likely, what we're seeing in Venezuela, be a transition government, somebody you can actually talk to. I don't think you can talk to the Ayatollah and the hardliners around him. They are stuck in what they're trying to achieve. They're not changing anything. Recovering the ballistic missile program, they want to recover their nuclear program. They want to continue to arm their proxies. They want to go on as if nothing happened in the last 2 years, which is a complete absurdity for the Iranian people. And certainly they are really the victims here. We have to keep focused on what is best for the Iranian people.
I remember hearing a line that empires fall when everyone suddenly realizes that the empire is weaker than they claim to be. And today, Iran, the Islamic Republic, might be weaker than it's been at any point since 1979. Not because the world has suddenly become brave, but because the regime has become exposed. For decades, Iran built itself on one central illusion: fear. Fear of its proxies, fear of its missiles, fear of revenge, fear of instability. But when a regime relies on fear more than legitimacy, it's like a building that's held up by scaffolding instead of a foundation. The moment the scaffolding shakes, everything starts to wobble. And right now, it's shaking on every front. Iran has tried to portray itself over the years as a regional superpower. But look carefully. Much of its strength is not direct strength. It's all outsourced. It's Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's militias in Iraq. It's Houthis in Yemen. It's Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza. That's not the behavior of a confident nation. That's the behavior of a regime that knows that it can't fight openly. It's like a man who can't win a fair fight, so he hires street gangs to intimidate the neighborhood. But here's what's happening. Those gangs are being degraded, they're being disrupted, and increasingly exposed as liabilities rather than assets. And when your entire strategy depends on proxies, and the proxies begin to collapse, you don't just lose influence, you lose deterrence. Now, economically, Iran is living under a slow motion collapse as well. If you look closely, the Iranian people are not blind. They live with inflation and currency collapse and joblessness and corruption and shortages. And that economic pressure matters more than people think, because when a society loses hope, it stops fearing the government. And when people stop fearing the government loses the only language that it knows: force. The regime spends billions funding terrorism abroad, while ordinary Iranians struggle to afford the basics of home. It's not simply immoral, it's unsustainable. And this is why internal protest movements keep returning again and again. Not because the people don't understand the risk, they do, but because the cost of living under tyranny eventually becomes greater than the cost of resisting it. Militarily, Iran is being tested and revealed. Now we're hearing increased pressure for U.S. military action, and here's the key point. The reason pressure rises isn't only because Iran is dangerous, it's also because Iran is vulnerable. Iran's strategy has always been bluff, to project strength, to convince the world, if you hit us, we'll burn the region down. But bluffing only works when the other side believes the poker face. And today, the regime is being forced to show its cards. Its systems can be struck, its supply lines can be disrupted, its leadership can be contained, its proxies can be dismantled, and perhaps most importantly, Iran is increasingly isolated. The regime is loud, but it's not admired. It's feared, but it's not loved. And fear doesn't build alliances, it builds resentment. Now, what about America's interests? Let's say something very clearly, right? Because America certainly doesn't want any more forever wars. No decent person wants endless conflict. But America should want a world where regimes like this don't dominate entire regions through terror. A falling Iranian regime would mean a weaker global terror network, a safer Middle East, less threat to Israel and the US allies, more stable energy routes, less hostage diplomacy, less funding for extremist movements worldwide. And in plain language, if the regime falls, America wins without having to occupy a country, because the Islamic Republic has not been a normal state actor. It's been a revolutionary regime exporting chaos for ideological survival. This isn't about Iran as a people. Iran is an ancient civilization full of beauty, intellect, poetry, faith, and dignity. It's about the regime that hijacked that civilization. There's an analogy I often use. If a house is on fire, you don't sit around debating the psychology of flames. You stop the fire. Iran's regime is a fire that spreads through militias, through terror, through destabilization. And every time the world appeases it, the regime learns one lesson: push harder. But when it's confronted, it learns another lesson: limits exist. Iran today is like a dam with cracks running through it. For years, the world has stared at the dam and said, let's not touch it. If it breaks, the water is going to flood the region. But here's the truth no one likes to say. The dam is already leaking. And the longer we wait, the worse the eventual collapse is going to be. The question isn't whether the pressure will release. The question is how. Now is the moment for moral clarity, to strengthen allies, to weaken terror networks, to defend freedom, and yes, to support the Iranian people's right to live without tyranny. Because when evil is weak, the world must not give it oxygen. And history teaches, when tyrannies fall, they don't fall because good people were perfect. They fall because enough good people stopped being afraid. And Iran may be closer to that point than it has been for nearly half a century. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.